wanted to thank you for the invitation, and I'm very happy to be here and to share with you my experience and journey from a life in academia in bioinformatics to my role in BBC as data scientist. So I studied computer science, and when I finished, I was interested in applying the technical knowledge that I had learned to another field, and I was interested in biology and medicine, so I decided to do a master in bioinformatics and computational biology, and at the end of it I started my PhD, and my research work was a project, a multidisciplinary project, halfway between artificial intelligence and biology. And these are my advisors, represented by an artificial neural network and a biological neural network. And yeah, they didn't quite understand each other because of the different fields, so I was a bit in the middle, and but I will talk about that later too. So my thesis was based on machine learning methods for understanding and studying metabolism, and so you have in order for you to understand a bit what I used to do, one of the projects I worked was with biologists that were studying memory and learning deficits in Down syndrome. So I worked with them analyzing their data, and they had data from an experiment that they had done with Down syndrome mice and control mice, and they wanted to know which proteins in their brains were different between the different groups. So I worked with them trying to understand this data and to answer their questions. So we tried a lot of methods, and we ended up using an artificial neural network that helped us cluster these mice based on the levels of these proteins. And this is an example, and if you have more questions I can explain it to you later too. But the idea is that these methods helped us visualize the data, and what was very interesting for me was to work with non-technical people that didn't understand the methods as I could, but then we walked through the understanding the problem and solving it together. So with this we could I helped them come up with new hypotheses, and also we ended up identifying small groups of proteins that were different between control and Down syndrome, and these proteins were important in order to design drug treatment for reducing learning impairment in Down syndrome. So yeah, what I enjoyed most was this path of working with people from a different field. And so one of the things I got from my academic experience and my PhD that influenced more in my career was the possibility to work with different research groups in Spain, and also I was lucky to have a scholarship, and I could go to US for a research stay, and there is where I started to get to know what data science was, and to see from other colleagues that companies were starting to hire people that could analyze data and use data for the businesses. So I also found out that there was a program in data science like 2 years ago called Inside Data Science that help people that have been working in academia to transition to industry. So here I built my first recommendation system, and I started to switch my mindset to a more industry aspect. And then I moved back to Europe, and I started working at BBC. And so you all most probably know, but BBC is one of the oldest public service broadcaster, but in the recent years it has been adapting itself to the digital world. And in terms of data, so it is immense. So we have the different products like BBC iPlayer, BBC News, BBC Sport. So only to have an idea about the amount of data that we generate every day. Every week we have like 14 million active registered users that generate more than 1 billion new records per day, and these are only registered users. So all this data form what is called digital behavior, and with this data we can understand and have a better understanding of our audiences. But how do we use the data from our audiences? So we have 3 main goals, and as a public service, well, the business model is, well, how we use data is to better understand our audiences, to create better products that make people enjoy coming to the BBC, and also we are very focused in reaching a diverse audience and to not miss anyone. And in terms of data science, I can talk about some of the projects that we are working. So in BBC there are 3 data science teams. I work in the marketing and audiences department, and now I'm also working with BBC News. But one example can be the assessment of effectiveness of marketing campaigns. So developing models that can help us know if showing a trail, how effective it is, so people end up watching the program, and because we don't have anything like that yet. And I worked also in a natural language processing project analyzing comments from viewers. So there is a team in the audience department that they talk directly with script writers and producers, and they give them feedback about how the show is being appreciated by the audiences. And they used to read the comments about viewers commenting on the show, and so I developed a tool that analyzes all these comments per month, and we can see like what is the average sentiment and how much. So what are the characters that are mostly mentioned, what is the sentiment associated with those characters, in order to give feedback to the script writers and producers to understand what people are saying in text. And also we did an analysis to see what are the words that are more related with a high or a lower appreciation. And I'm working now also in an audience segmentation project with clustering algorithms for BBC News. So we already know that there are like 4 groups of users that are more or less engaged. But like, for example, very engaged users or people that only come once and they leave. But we would like to understand more how are these groups of users. So here is where I come back to my PhD experience, and instead of mice, now I'm clustering users. And so based on certain characteristics, like behavioral characteristics, like device, do they share content, how many times they come, do they watch a lot of videos, do they comment, and those kind of things, we can have and we can extract groups of these users and also then map this information, behavioral information, with content data, and try to extract patterns of behavior related to what people read. Like, for example, people that don't come very often, that usually come from Facebook and they are interested in business. And we can also see if there are characteristics of this group that we can make something to them, so we can encourage this group of users to move to other more engaged. And this is helpful for having a global look of our audience, and also to identify and reach the demographics and see what minorities are interested in, and to also know if we should write more about it. And also it can help in editorial and product decisions, because we can, so one of these characteristics can be features in the web, like do people set location for getting local news, and we can give feedback back to product managers about the design of the web, or how the users are interacting with it. And also it's useful for recommendation, to see if we can recommend certain content to some people or not. I have to say that we use demographics only to understand the audience, not to serve content based on demographics. And so we have just started also designing recommendation systems based on content similarity, and this is a big project where a lot of software engineers, data engineers and data scientists are working, and we are very focused on the ethical use of algorithms and try to avoid filter bubbles and echo chambers. So we are designing scoring functions that evaluate if the content provided to a user is being narrowed down. So we don't want to just give people what we know they want to read, but we also want to add some diversity to the content, so people are exposed to more things. And I have been working here for a year and 2 months, but I've seen, so there are some challenges that I think we are facing, that are, so the BBC is being transformed to a more data-informed company, and this is, so being witness of this transformation is, I really like it. So it needs a lot of collaboration between data people and people that are more senior, more editorial, and that they don't know how to use data. So we have to do a lot of communication and a lot of we have to show a lot what we do to convince them that using data is good. And also, what I really like is that there is a lot of data that we can exploit and a lot of projects, but I'm also very attracted of using data ethically and using algorithms responsibly. And in terms of tips, I think there are two. One is similar to the one that Rachel gave. It's trying to identify what you want. I know it sounds very difficult, but I think working in data is important to solve problems that you like, because otherwise, well, or at least I get very bored, and or to find some motivation. And the second one is in data science and data analytics. I have found a bit difficult to find either role models or what's next for me. And I think coming to these events and meet a lot of people and see what people do, and then talk to them and so ask them, well, how did you get this job, or what did you do to get here? I think that's the only thing we can do, because it's so new that there is no one answer. So you have to build your own career, and that's it.